Hi everybody, it's Miss B. Hope you're having a great day, and today we are going to get back to blood typing. Now today I want to focus on what blood typing actually looks like in a lab setting and what kind of tests you have to perform in order to determine a person's blood type. Now, in order to determine a person's blood type, we add 3 different serums to our blood sample to see if any clumping happens or agglutination, if you will. And the way we do this is we actually use this blood typing well plate. And you can see that it has 3 different wells in it. One that is labeled A, one labeled B, and one labeled RH. And this symbolizes the 3 different antigens that can be present on the surface of our red blood cell. So in my A well, I am going to put a serum or a liquid that contains A antibodies. In my B well, I'm going to do the same thing, but with B antibodies. And my RH well is going to have RH antibodies. Now, I hope you remember, but if not, an antibody is that little structure swimming around in the plasma of your blood, and it is going to link up with any matching antigens so that are on the surface of your red blood cell. So if you have A antigens on the surface of your red blood cell, and meaning you have type A blood, sorry. So if I have type A blood, I have A antigens on the surface of my red blood cell. If I put it in this well filled with those antibodies are perfectly shaped to that antigen. They're going to latch on kind of like a lock and a key, and that's what causes that clumping, that agglutination. And that's what tells us that that antigen is present. So if when we add our blood sample to our 3 well plates, it clumps, that means that it is positive for that antigen. If there is no clumping, that means that that antigen is not present. Therefore, it's not a part of our blood type. Now, this is a sample of what a well plate can look like once you've added your blood and your serums to it. And I want you to think about what this possible blood type is. Now, you can use this nice little chart down here to help you as well. When I look up at my A well right here, I can see that there's not a lot of clumping going on. It's fairly smooth. So this means that it is negative. So if I look down at reactions with anti-A serum, I only am left with 2 options, right? If it's type B blood, it would have tested negative, or type O blood. So now my 2 options have been narrowed down to B or O blood. So I'm going to take a look at B. I can see that there's definitely been some clumping here, which means that it has tested positive and means that our blood does have a B antigen in it. Now, if it has a B antigen, that means that it's tested positive. Our blood must be type B. But how are we going to figure out if our type B blood is positive or negative? That's what's going to bring us to our RH well. Now here we can definitely see some clumping happening as well. And this means, once again, that it is positive. So one of the easier ways to remember the RH system to tell if your blood is positive or negative, if it clumps, it's tested positive. That means that that antigen is there. I have positive blood. If there is no clumping, that means that I have negative blood. Okay? Now let's go ahead and look at a different image over here. So in this image, I have put which wells tested positive, which ones had agglutination happening, which are our A and our RH, as well as my B well, which tested negative. There was no agglutination happening here. So what blood type do you think this person has? If you guessed A positive, then you are correct. So just knowing that if there's a plus, you include it in your blood type. If there is a negative, there is no antigen, and you do not include it in the blood type. So that means that this blood type would be A, and since it tested positive for my Rh, that means that I have positive blood. So it's A positive. Now let's go ahead and do a few more. My first one here has tested positive for my A and my B antigens. So that means that I must have AB blood. However, I now have to look and see if it is positive or negative. Since there was no clumping, I know that this is negative blood. So my blood type here is AB negative. On the next blood type test here, we see that it did not test positive for A, so there are no A antigens. However, there are some B antigens. We did see some agglutination happening here. It also tested negative for Rh. So that means that my blood type must be B negative. All right. Now for the next three, I'd like you to pause this video and take a guess at what you think these three blood types are. All right. Hopefully you have made your guesses, and we're going to go through these a little quicker together. Now, I know that on this one, my blood has been tested positive in all three wells, so that means that I have AB positive blood. My next one may be a little trickier. Here I have tested negative for all three of my options. Now, the only blood type that tests negative for both of my antibody A and antibody serums is type O. So I know that this is type O blood and that it must be negative. This is O negative blood. And our very last one is A negative. All right. Hopefully you're a little more comfortable with this. And I know that we can't do this in class together. However, I still want you guys to be able to see what this actually looks like in real life. So for the remainder of the video, we're going to go through a scenario, and there will be a video of me doing a blood typing scenario for you. However, I am not going to tell you what is happening in those well plates. You will see and able to answer some of the lab questions attached. So make sure you watch the rest of this video. All right, now it's your turn. Here's our scenario. Crime investigators were called to the scene of a burglary. Mr. Smith had come home only to find someone robbing his apartment. As the criminal rushed to leave the apartment, he ran into the glass door, cutting his arm and tearing his shirt. The crime investigators were able to remove small pieces of clothing that appeared to be bloodstained. The blood samples from the crime scene were sent to the forensic lab to be analyzed. After the crime investigators carefully reviewed all of the available evidence, they apprehended 4 suspects who were near the apartment at the time of the crime. The last remaining piece of evidence needed to solve the crime is to match the blood type found at the scene with one of the suspects. You have been chosen to provide this last piece of evidence and determine which of the suspects is the burglar. All right, so the first blood type test that we are going to conduct is the one for the blood sample that was found at the crime scene. This is the blood type that we are now going to be matching to our suspects later on. So I'm just going to put a sample of the blood in each of our well plates, and then I'm going to go ahead and put my antibody serum. So here I have my antibody A serum, and I'm going to put about 3 or 4 drops in my A well plate. This will test and tell me if I have an A antigen in my blood, if it clumps. Now I have my antibody B serum, that I'll put in my B well plate, and my RH serum that I will put in my RH well plate. Okay. Our next step is to give each of our well plates a mix with a clean toothpick. This is just to get the antibodies to react to any of the antigens. And as you can see, this blood is starting to clump or agglutinate. So that means that we do have type A blood at least. We know that the A antigen is present. Okay. Now I'm going to take a new clean toothpick and do that to my next blood type. You want to make sure you use a clean toothpick to avoid contamination. And you can see the blood is starting to agglutinate here as well. Okay. And our next one. Alright, so I'm going to give you a closer look at these blood types. By moving them back and forth, you can usually see if the blood is clumping or not. So A and RH definitely are clumping, and B is as well. Usually B is a little bit harder to differentiate, so I'll help you out with this one. This one is definitely agglutinating. You can tell when you move it that there's still those little pieces at the bottom. Alright, so go ahead and write down what your blood type is for our blood sample in your worksheet, and I will be back with our next suspect blood type. Alright, so now that we know what the blood type is for the blood found at the crime scene, we need to test the blood from each of our 4 suspects and see which one matches that found at the crime scene. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing here with the blood sample I have from suspect number 1. Alright. So as you can see, it looks like all of our blood samples remained very fluid and there is no clumping. So go ahead and write down what you think the blood type is for suspect number 1. Alright, next up is suspect number 2, and I'm going to repeat the same process. Alright, so just so you can have a better look, these are the results from suspect number 2. Alright, you can see where they are clumping and where they are not, so go ahead and write down your blood type for suspect number 2. So this is our blood type test for suspect number 3. Alright, so as you can see, this is the results for suspect number 3. And I just wanted to remind you, this one is kind of faint, you can't quite see it, but there is some clumping going on in well plate B as well. Alright, and this is our last blood sample for suspect number 4. Alright, so when I bring this back and forth, you can see that 2 of the blood types, wells, the A and the RH, move very quickly, very smooth, and my B down here does have some agglutination happening. So go ahead and write down what the blood type is for suspect B, or number 4. Now that you have all 4 of your suspects written down as well as the blood type from the crime scene, you should know which suspect committed the crime. So feel free to complete your worksheet and you're done for the day. Alright, have a great day everybody. Bye-bye.